There's a bush growing wild along roadsides across America right now that a single mature plant can load with up to 80 pounds of fruit in one season. That is not a typo, 80 pounds. From one bush, every year, with no fertilizer, no spraying, and almost no care from anyone. And here is the part that makes no sense. For decades, government crews have been paid to cut these bushes down, poison their stumps, and dig out their roots. Millions of them, planted on purpose, then destroyed on purpose, by the same institutions that recommended them in the first place. So, which is it? A miracle food plant or a mistake we are still trying to erase? By the end of this video, you will understand exactly what happened and why the truth is more interesting than either story. My name is not important. What matters is that I have spent years studying the plants that fell through the cracks of official history. Stay with me, because this one rewrites what you think you know about the food growing right outside your door. The bush is called the autumn olive. The botanical name is Elaeagnus umbellata, and despite the name, it is not related to the olives you eat on pizza. It is a sprawling shrub that grows 10 to 16 feet tall and even wider, covered in small silvery leaves that shimmer in the wind. In late summer, it produces clusters of tiny red berries, each one speckled with silver flecks, sweet and tart at the same time. Now before I go further, let me tell you where this plant came from, because the story starts on the other side of the world. The autumn olive is native to China, Japan, and Korea. It was first brought to the United States around the 1830s as an ornamental shrub. For about a century, it sat quietly in gardens. Then, in the 1950s, something changed that would put this bush in the ground by the millions. The United States Soil Conservation Service, the federal agency tasked with healing damaged land, looked at this plant and saw a solution to several problems at once. Here is why they were so excited. The autumn olive does something most plants cannot. It fixes nitrogen straight from the air into the soil through its roots. That means it can thrive in poor, eroded, lifeless ground where almost nothing else will grow. Strip mines, roadside cuts, exhausted farmland. It tolerates drought, it survives in rocky, ruined soil, and it grows fast, forming dense cover in just a few years. On top of that, it feeds wildlife. Birds and small mammals devour the berries through the winter when little else is available. So the recommendation went out. Plant autumn olive everywhere, for erosion control, for windbreaks, for highway beautification, for wildlife habitat, for reclaiming strip mines. And people did. Across the eastern half of the country, the autumn olive went to the ground by the millions, encouraged by the government itself. Let me pause here for a moment, because I want to be honest with you about something this channel cares about deeply. A lot of videos about this plant will tell you it was deliberately suppressed, that powerful interests buried it to keep you dependent. That is not what the records show. What actually happened is more ordinary, and in some ways more useful to understand. The people who planted it were not lying. They genuinely believed they were doing good. The problem was that the very traits that made it perfect for healing damaged land also made it nearly impossible to control once it escaped. Those 80 pounds of fruit on a single bush translate into tens of thousands of seeds. Birds eat the berries and scatter those seeds across miles of countryside. The plant resprouts aggressively from its roots after being cut. It outcompetes native plants, shades them out, and changes the chemistry of the soil itself. Within a few decades, the same agencies that promoted it began listing it as an invasive species. By the 1970s and beyond, the reversal was complete. The official advice flipped from plant this everywhere to remove this wherever you find it. And so the bulldozing and the herbicide programs began. That is the real answer to the question in the title. The bushes were destroyed not because the fruit was dangerous, but because the plant spread beyond anyone's ability to manage it. Now you might think that is the end of the story, a well-meaning mistake, slowly being undone. But there is a twist that almost nobody talks about. Because while one branch of the government was tearing these bushes out of the ground, another branch was studying the fruit in a laboratory, and what they found stunned them. In the late 1990s, researchers at the United States Department of Agriculture decided to analyze the chemistry of autumn olive berries. What they discovered was that these wild, unwanted berries are one of the richest natural sources of lycopene ever measured. Lycopene is the red pigment that gives tomatoes their color. It is a powerful antioxidant that has drawn enormous scientific interest for its potential role in heart health and in protecting against certain cancers. For most people, the tomato is the main source of lycopene in the diet. A fresh tomato contains roughly 3 milligrams of lycopene per 100 grams. The autumn olive berry, by comparison, was measured at anywhere from 15 to 54 milligrams per 100 grams. In some samples, up to 17 times more lycopene than a tomato. Think about that. The bush being bulldozed as a worthless pest produces a fruit richer in this prized antioxidant than almost anything you can buy in a grocery store. The berries are also a good source of vitamins A, C, and E, along with flavonoids and other compounds linked to antioxidant activity. The USDA researchers were so impressed that they began propagating selected plants, exploring whether autumn olive could become a commercial crop. So picture the absurdity. One federal program funding the destruction of these bushes. Another federal program trying to grow more of them for their fruit. That contradiction is the heart of this whole story, and it tells you something important. This plant is neither a miracle nor a menace. It is both, depending on where it grows. I have spent years working through exactly these tensions, the gap between what a plant can do and how we are told to treat it. I have pulled together everything I have learned into a complete reference guide called the Sovereign Garden Code. And this week, it is available for a small one-time price. Inside, you will find a detailed chapter on plants exactly like this one, the forgotten and the misunderstood, with the verified research behind each claim laid out plainly. It is not a magic trick, and I will never pretend it is. It is honest, sourced information for people who want to understand the food growing around them. The link is in the description if you want it. Now, let me get back to the plant itself, because if you have autumn olive growing near you, there are things you genuinely need to know. First, identification. The autumn olive is easy to recognize once you know the signs, and easy to confuse if you do not. Look for the silvery underside of the leaves. Flip a leaf over and it should look almost frosted, covered in fine silver scales that catch the light. The berries are small, round, and red when ripe, dotted with tiny silver or brown speckles. Those speckles are the giveaway. The shrub often carries thorns, and the stems are speckled too. In spring, it produces small, cream-colored flowers with a strong, sweet fragrance. Be careful not to confuse it with its cousin, the Russian olive, which has narrower leaves that are silvery on both sides and yellow fruit. Now, the critical question. Are the berries safe to eat? Yes, the ripe red berries are entirely edible and have been eaten for generations, but timing matters enormously. Unripe berries are intensely astringent, so mouth puckering and dry that they are almost inedible. Wait until late autumn, often after the first frost, when the berries turn deep red and soft. That is when the sugars develop and the astringency fades. The flavor is hard to describe. Somewhere between a tart cherry, a pomegranate, and a tomato. Tangy, sweet, and unlike anything in a supermarket. Each berry contains a single soft seed. You can eat them whole, but the seeds are best swallowed or strained out rather than chewed, as they can taste a little dry. Foragers across the country turn these berries into jam, fruit leather, syrup, and sauce. Because of the lycopene and the tartness, some even make an autumn olive ketchup. The simplest way to process a large harvest is to run the berries through a food mill, which separates the smooth pulp from the seeds and skins. Here is something worth sitting with. If you live in an area where this plant is considered invasive, harvesting the berries is one of the few ways you can actually help. Every berry you pick and eat is a berry the birds will not scatter into new ground. You become, in a sense, the missing predator that keeps the plant in check. So instead of fighting the plant with poison, you can fight it with a fork. That is a far more satisfying kind of control, and a far more honest one. But I want to be clear and responsible here, because this matters. In many states, the sale and planting of autumn olive is now restricted or banned. This is not a conspiracy. It is a genuine ecological concern. The plant truly does harm native ecosystems when it spreads unchecked. So if you are thinking of planting one, do not. Please check with your local agricultural extension office first, because in many places it is the wrong thing to do. But if the plant is already growing wild near you, and in much of the country it almost certainly is, then harvesting that free, nutrient-rich fruit is both legal and genuinely helpful. That is the balance this plant demands. Respect its danger as an invader, and respect its value as a food. Both things are true at the same time. Let me come back to that question we started with. Why were millions bulldozed? Now you know the real answer, and it is not a story of villains. It is a story about good intentions running ahead of understanding, about a plant so good at surviving that it became impossible to contain. And it is a story about how the same fruit can be poison to an ecosystem and a treasure to a forager all at once. The autumn olive is not the only plant with a history like this. There are dozens of species that were planted, praised, then condemned, their real value lost in the back and forth. Learning to see these plants clearly, without the hype and without the fear, is one of the most useful skills a gardener or forager can develop. That is exactly the kind of thinking I try to bring to everything on this channel. Verified facts, honest framing, and respect for your intelligence. If that approach is something you value, the best thing you can do is subscribe and stay with this channel. There's a whole world of forgotten, misunderstood, and quietly extraordinary plants out there, and we are only getting started exploring it together. So the next time you drive past a tangle of silvery-leaved bushes, heavy with red berries on the side of the road, you will know. You will know it was planted by a government that hoped to heal the land. You will know it was later condemned by that same government as a pest. And you will know that hidden inside those little speckled berries is one of the richest sources of lycopene ever measured in nature. A miracle and a mistake, growing side by side, waiting for someone who finally understands the difference. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.